I am Claudette Brochu, the chair of the select board, calling this meeting to order at 6:32. And first, our little script here. As chair of the Norwich Select Board, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Scott as a result of COVID-19 pandemic and pursuant to Addendum 6 to Executive Order 01-20 and Act 92, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. In accordance with Act 92, there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance to with the temporary amendments to the open meeting law, I confirm that we are providing public access via Zoom or telephone. All roll call votes will be, all votes will be roll call. The public will be invited to speak. We ask that when you are recognized, you state your name and locatable address. And Roger will speak up in just a minute on how to notify the board that you wish to speak. And so I just want to confirm that all the select board members are here. As I mentioned, I'm Claudette Brochu, the chair. We're joined by Robert Gear, Mary Layton, Roger Arnold, John Langus, and our town manager, Herb Durfee, his administrative assistant, Miranda Bergmeyer, and various members of the public. So Roger, your turn.
Yes, so to participate via the Zoom platform, please go to reactions and push the raise hand. That'll signal to me and to the room that you would like to make a comment, and then wait for Claudette Brochu to recognize you. If you're by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand, and then once recognized, *6 to unmute yourself.
Okay, so first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Any board members have any comments? John?
Oh, unfortunately, once again, so I've drafted the first draft of the climate emergency fund policies, but I didn't get that done early enough for the packet. So we should remove that agenda item, and it will definitely be in the next packet.
Okay, thank you. Any other additions, deletions, reordering by the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to public and select board comments.
Stuart Richards has his hand up.
And these comments are related to issues that are not on our agenda. So go ahead, Stuart.
You'll have to unmute yourself, Stuart. I can only ask to unmute you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. So I've written several letters addressing the community policing budget cuts. Although some of you, maybe all of you, are suffering from budget fatigue, I and a number of other people feel it's important that the community policing budget not be reduced, and that additional funding in the amount of $1,000 be available to replace the $630 that was cut. I'd like to emphasize that these are donations or contributions to assure that community policing will not be restrained by lack of funding. I also would like to assure you that there are no sinister intentions as stated by Kathleen Shepard, and there's no Trump-esque methods as stated by Rich Acker involved here. It's simply a desire to ensure that community policing programs continue and that they are enhanced. There's no need for name calling when discussing community policing or any other subject. I'd like to mention just a few of the community policing programs. There's the texting while driving program, because there's been a 400 increase in driver violations. So the police have provided phone holders and tried to do other things to try and rein that in. There's a babysitting certification course, and they use they teach CPR and they use dummies, and there are some costs involved. There's bike safety. There's the Bike Safety Day. More than 75 youth participated in Bike Safety Day. And that included road safety instruction, agility courses, bike helmet safety, fitting for sessions, and a bunch of other things. Another program is Coffee with a Cop. More than 75 residents attended one of the 4 coffee sessions. Pen Pal program, another one, 32 local youth participated in the Norwich Police Department Pen Pal program. And the police have had multiple speaking engagements and training programs, and I won't go into all the details on all of those. Halloween safety has been an important function, and 400 glow sticks were distributed to our kids to keep them safe. Operation Safety Cone, where kids were issued certificates at Dan and Witt's to get ice cream cones. There's the Touch a Truck program and training time. So those are just a few of the programs that are involved in the programs that they have, which fall under the category of municipal policing. I would very much like to hear back from the select board as to whether the select board will accept the donation of $1,000, even though the budget has been finalized. And if it's not spent on municipal policing in the next couple of years, it can be returned. Or whether possibly you could establish a fund, or we could establish a fund, much like the rec fund or the conservation fund, that could be created to supplement the police budget. I'd also like to know whether the select board will accept a $30,000 donation, anonymous donation, to supply the police with cameras. So thank you very much for hearing me out, and I would hope that you would follow up and respond and let me know.
So Herb, can you speak to the donation piece, not the, well, to both of them, because I believe that $30,000 was for the cameras was a grant, not a donation. But can you speak to Stuart's comment about just sending a check to the town?
If I'm mistaken about the fact that it was a grant rather than a donation, I apparently have misunderstood. So apologies for that.
So well, with regard to the former, there was a request that's been, it's 100% grant per se, but it's almost the equivalent of a donation from that standpoint. But it is in the format of a grant, but it's 100% grant. There's no local match with regard to it for what we're receiving. There may be additional funds that we need to raise in order to finish the total cost of body worn cameras and such, but there's no expectation from the organization that there's a local match to what was requested. With regard to anybody that wants to donate money, if the donations are not uncommon with regard to the town of Norwich. Recreation is one of the greatest recipients of those kinds of things. Typically what we do in this particular instance, there's not an existing reserve or designated fund that we could put it into. But what we do is we set it up as a special purpose fund, which would make it a restricted fund for the specific use of which the donation comes from. And we've done that as a, for instance, with the granite, trying to find some funds for our granite bench on Main Street, where we're in a situation where we actually may be returning those funds because we didn't get a Vermont Arts Council grant. We just found that out about a week ago. So we may be returning those funds, but that's not an uncommon practice. But again, most of it is usually related to recreational related type of facilities or other special interest type of situations.
Any other public comments? John?
So the grant donation is it was it from an organization or is it an anonymous thing or not?
I believe it's a burn grant.
Jag Burn.
The local burn grant, not USJ.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks.
So okay, so I mean, yeah. All right. Thank you for clarifying.
So if, are there any select board comments?
I would just suggest that we talked about in our agenda setting process having a gift policy. And so I would argue that this might fall under that discussion. So that's all that I would say, that like, indeed, this could very well possibly be a future agenda item as we've discussed in our agenda setting process.
You do already have a gift policy under your master financial policies.
Yeah, and I
It may
would
not
say,
fully address things, but I'm just
and
saying,
it's,
yeah.
it may very well be inadequate for all situations.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, if there are no other public or select board comments, gonna move to the consent agenda. Anyone willing to make a motion? Mary,
I move to approve the consent agenda.
is there a second?
Second.
So motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll roll call. Rob,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes,
John,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Moving on to number 4, this is our first, going to be our first public hearing related to the Beaver Meadow sidewalk study. And is anyone willing to make a motion to open this public session, public hearing? Mary,
I'll do it. I move to open the first public hearing to solicit input regarding the Beaver Meadow sidewalk project.
is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. We'll roll call. Rob,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes,
John,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. And I do want to adhere to our 20-minute allotment for this item. So with
So
that, I will open the
Do we
public.
want to set a per comment limit in order to succeed at that? We've really gotten away from that in the time of COVID. We used to have a set policy on that we don't enforce anymore. But that might be helpful.
Do we want 2 minutes? Does that sound
Good.
reasonable?
Seems good.
Okay. So in the packet is included the petition or from multiple members, many members of the public, but I will now open this up to any public comment.
I don't see any Zoom.
It's going to be a quick discussion.
Herb,
Just because there were some folks that couldn't attend tonight, they sent some emails. And these were all in support of the project, from Brian Shiner, Paul Manglio, Ainsley Morse, Lisa, I can't pronounce her last name, I'm sorry, Lisa Jostrom, if that's the right pronunciation. And I already talked about Ainsley Morse.
and there have been multiple letters in previous packets in support of the project. I wanted to point that out as well.
We have Michelle, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a statement in support, in very strong support.
Michelle, before you speak, can you just state your full name and locatable address?
Of course I can. Thank you. Sorry about that. Michelle Tyne. I live at 19 Bragg Hill Road in Norwich, which is just at the base of Bragg Hill, very close to the intersection of Beaver Meadow and Bragg. And I just want to make a statement in very strong support, and I make that as a resident of the town of Norwich, and someone who has young children, and someone who would live in very close proximity. So there are both kind of personal reasons, but then when I put on my professional hat, I'd also like to make a statement. I have a PhD in developmental psychology. I'm an associate professor and the chair of the education department at Dartmouth College. And there is ample research to show that communities that have public spaces and access to public spaces benefit all sorts of outcomes, both mental health, physical health, developmental outcomes for all community members. And for that reason, I'm a huge advocate of anything that is going to, improve, enhance, maintain, create access to public space. And in my mind, this sidewalk does that in that it connects different parks. It encourages people to be outside of all ages. So I am a huge proponent of the project. And while I realize there's a cost involved, I'm very pleased to see that 80% is hopefully going to be covered by the state grant if received. And I strongly believe that that extra 20% is a reasonable thing for this town to spend their money on, showing and knowing that the research is so clear. And that's all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So
Kate-
Kate Barlow and Demo. Yeah, do you see?
I think Kate was first.
Yes.
Thanks, everyone. I'm Kate Barlow. I live at 328 Turnpike Road in Norwich. And I won't so eloquently summarize my support for the sidewalk as Michelle did, but wanted to reiterate that I think it's really important to have a safe walking loop around town, not only for those of us with young children, but also for those of us with elderly parents who would like to be able to spend time with their friends and family members. And if they need a walking stick, then to be able to do a safe loop that doesn't involve them stepping onto the road or into a very narrow shoulder. And just to build off something that Stuart said before, with the increase in distracted driving, I think it's even more important when we can't guarantee that drivers have their eyes on the road, that we have space set aside for a safe pedestrian access in town. So that's my biggest concern, is that a distracted driver will pummel into the side of someone on that shoulder, and then a sidewalk will happen soon. So let's try and get ahead of the tragedies here and do the sensible thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Demo, you're next.
Yes, can everybody hear me? I'm not, I'm unmuted, I guess. Okay. Demos Sophronis, 82 Glen Ridge Road. And at the last meeting, I gave a little brief history as to the so-called closing of the loop. That the Advanced Transit bus line had made the complete loop around the Huntley Meadow back to town. And at that time, there was discussion about closing the loop, and eventually doing a sidewalk would be a good way to do that. And of course, other things that were more pertinent at the time. Just kept putting it off. So I would like to just say that I am in support of it. I think it would be a really nice way for people to get to the playground, to the other side, make that complete loop, leave a car at the park and ride, save some gas, and enjoy the outdoors. It's a nice in-town loop for people to enjoy. And also that my option that I would pick would be the west side sidewalk, as it would be the least disruptive to the neighborhood. And I'm not one for taking people's property away, but if this can be done safely and also not disruptive to, I'm sure there'll be some disruption, but as little as possible, I'm all for this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Demo. Stuart?
Hi, Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. There certainly are safety concerns with a lot of roads, not Beaver Meadow alone. And you can look at Elm Street and Hobson Road where I live. And you could make a very good case, I think, or it's the same case for putting in a sidewalk on Elm Street and Hobson Road. The thing that concerns me, and I'll speak as an elderly parent, grandparent who has grandchildren, and we do go around Beaver Meadow on our bicycles, and we also walk there, and we haven't had a problem. And what concerns me most, I suppose, is cost, because of the time that we are in with respect to COVID, with respect to people who are having problems with their employment and with other problems. So I think that this is not a good time, even though the study has been done and a lot of work has gone into this. I don't think that this is a really good time to spend a lot of money and see the budget increase by whatever it happens to be. I don't know whether we're going to get the 80% cost share, and I don't know whether 20%, $200,000, or what the final number will be. But it concerns me that our budgets, when we think about them, I think the budget, and I certainly can be corrected here, I think the school budget is going to be going up, I don't know, 13% or 15% or whatever the percentage is. And our municipal budget is going up 6% or whatever that percentage is. And I certainly can use some help on what the numbers are.
So
But-
Stuart, time.
Yeah, okay. So
And
that's my concern, basically. So thanks for hearing me out.
okay, and I just want to remind people that please don't use the chat if you, that's okay, Kate. It's just, it's hard for people, or people who are on the phone certainly can't see the chat. And I believe, Kate, your statement was you're advocating for the west sidewalk approach. So having said that, next we'll go to Peter.
Thank you, Claudette. I'm still learning how to use my reaction buttons. Apparently, I have to get my daughter to come help me. I've spoken. Oh,
Name and locatable address.
Peter
please.
Orner. Sorry, Peter Orner, 6 Moore Lane. I've spoken a number of times on this. I'm on record, so I won't repeat myself. But I would like to respectfully refute a couple of points of Mr. Richards, and that is that there really isn't a comparison between Beaver Meadow and certainly not Elm Street or Hobson. Those are not throughways. They're not truck routes. They're not connectors from one town to another. There is no comparison in terms of the amount of traffic. And I will say this also, that I think we've been asking pedestrians for a long time to roll with the changes that have happened in town. With the increase in a number of vehicles, both truck and cars. And as Stuart Richards pointed out, and I absolutely agree with him, there's a large increase in distracted driving and text driving issues, as he articulated earlier. So, I think that it's as if we bend over backward to accommodate drivers, but don't acknowledge the increased amount of pedestrians using this road. And anybody who's been on Beaver Meadow, especially after dark during winter time, knows that it's not a safe place to be ever, but certainly not this time of year. So again, I really appreciate everybody's input, and I appreciate the concerns about the budget. And we are absolutely in favor of applying for the grant. And as Michelle Tyne said, it's worth it. What we might have to pony up to pay for this, number one. And number two, we've already invested quite a bit. So, which I appreciate, and thanks for your time.
Thank you. Any other we're on two screens, so Roger, I'm really gonna need you to help me.
Okay. Andy Shear has his hand up.
Hi, Andy Shear, 23 Hazen. I actually have a question in terms of the actual timeline on this. The grants we're talking about, we're applying for a phase 2 grant would be the next step. That would be coming down in the next year or so. The actual construction of this is probably not for a couple years off as well. Am I correct? Can I ask that? Is that Herb or Roger or anybody can answer that? Yeah. So to people's concerns about, yes, we are in a global pandemic. People are getting vaccinated. I think we are seeing hopefully the end of the tunnel, the light at the end of the tunnel here. So to put up a block on this now, I think would be detrimental to the long-term project. I think, we have over 150, 170 signatures of people saying, yes, we want this. I urge everyone to read the comments. Globally, people are for this. And I think, the time is right now because it will be setting us up for a couple of years from now when the actual construction can happen. So I feel like this is time and money well spent now to move us forward so that we're set up to do it in the future. And I guess that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really bad. I said we would adhere to the 20 minutes, but I can't remember when we started this conversation. I think it was
6:45.
Pardon me?
6:45.
Okay.
I wrote it down.
Mary?
Oh, okay. Any other public comment?
I don't see any. No more Zoom hands.
Okay. John?
I do have my hand up. I don't know what's happening.
You clapped, Cheryl. You didn't. I thought you were applauding your citizens. So
no. Under my reactions, I have a heart and a thumb and a clap and
okay. So Cheryl has her hand up, Claudette.
Go ahead, Cheryl.
Sorry, I'll have to. Yeah, I don't have a grandchild here to help me. Cheryl Lindbergh, 59 Koch Road. I would like to echo Stuart's comments. I will not repeat them, but add on to them that I still believe that the select board, as representatives of the residents of Norwich, should be looking at sidewalks as a big picture item. A capital improvement plan should be in place, that there is nobody that's for or against sidewalks. It's like we're not doing a great job of taking care of what we have. We need to resolve this with the fire district. And going forward with this project is not the smartest thing to be doing right now. And I would urge the select board to think about it from a planning perspective and think of everybody in town and how it will be best handled. And that's, again, repairing the ones that exist is an important part of the fund we have. We don't need, perfect sidewalks, but we certainly could be working on a plan for the entire sidewalk of Norwich is my point. Thanks.
Thank you, Cheryl.
I see. So Jared has a Zoom hand up, and then someone by Eric had a physical hand up. So
and John Langus, did you want to pipe in before? I know you had a comment. And
no, I thought we were waiting and having select board comments at the end, so I'm happy to wait until all the public comments over.
Okay, Jared, go ahead.
Oh, hey, my name is Jared Dunn. I live at 62 Union Village Road. I am very excited about the idea of the sidewalk that is being proposed.
Okay, thank you, Jared.
Also, sewer underneath it would be really good too. Thank you.
This is lovely. Eric has had his physical hand up, Claudette.
Eric, go ahead.
Linda
Name and location address.
Join the meeting.
Hi, yeah, Eric Capone, 55 Turnpike Road. The last meeting I was at when we were discussing this in breakout groups, I learned that this movement began in the 1980s. I don't know if we can wait another 40 years for us to take the next step. I won't even be walking at that point. So I'm really concerned about sort of the timeline of this. It really should be expedited. So whatever we can do to support you for that, I'm all for it. I think if they're visible and there's more of them, I think the maintenance is obviously the next piece that people are going to get behind.
Thank you, Eric. Dawn, oh, sorry.
I think that's it. Someone, yeah.
John, go ahead.
Thanks, Claudette. So I appreciate all the comments tonight. I have to say that I was pretty struck by the names list that we were presented with here. So we had a pretty thoughtful discussion a few weeks ago about whether we would require signatures for petitions for things like articles that wanted to be proposed for the town meeting. And we talked about how difficult that would be under the current circumstances. I've gathered these signatures before for the Article 36 and related ballot measures 2 years ago. That took me and Jack Cushman's on, he'd remember, like there were probably 6 or 7 or 8 of us collecting signatures to get to our 200 odd signatures over about 2 weeks. These guys gathered these 154 virtual signatures in like 3 days. I think that it's pretty, I'm certainly confident in saying that this has overwhelming support in our town. If we had gotten this study a month earlier, we would have been through this process early enough that we could have proposed it as a town meeting article. And I also have no doubt in my mind that it would have passed also overwhelmingly. I'm a little bit, you know, so every time sidewalks come up, we hear about the existing sidewalks, but we can only do what we do, right? So we hear all the time about the school septic. We don't have any authority to do anything about this town septic. We don't have any authority to do anything over the fire district's sidewalks. I wonder if every time I've heard this comment, actually, I think to a single person, it's been from someone who lives in the fire district. So what's happening at the fire district meetings? I mean, are people showing up to that and saying, hey, we need to do our job, we need to do our duty and pay some taxes and fix these sidewalks? Because that's not our duty. And we've made overtures to merge with the fire district, and then it would become the town's duty. But I don't like that being thrown up as an obstacle for what we can do, because someone else might not be carrying their weight. The point was made that we don't know if they're going to get the grant, but everyone that's talked about this proposal has talked about it being contingent on the grant. So no one's talking about the town spending $800,000, $1 million to do this. We're talking about funding it if the grant is received. The last point I would make, having just come out of the budget season, is to encourage people to think about the amount of money that we spend on roads, right? So you look at stuff like the police budget, we underspend on police in Norwich. That is true relative to other towns in Vermont. Chief Frank is going to be moving to a town that's about exactly the same size as ours that spends considerably more on police. They have a force that's double the size. She will get a well-deserved but significant raise there. We don't do that. There are other things that we pay our staff considerably less than other places, including our town manager, who's in the middle of an experiment that we did to reduce the town manager salary when we hired him. With the finance director role, we're struggling with that. The reason that Norwich pays more money than other towns is because of our road budget. We spend almost $300,000 a year on our roads. So this is a request to spend $20,000 with an ongoing maintenance obligation, $20,000 once since 1980, right? That seems like a pretty reasonable request. And quite frankly, I'd love to see a sidewalk on Hobson and Elm Street, if that's where we go to next. I love sidewalks. So that's all I got to say. Thank you,
I'm going to take a comment from Rob. Rob, the select board members don't need to raise a virtual hand.
Okay,
Your
just,
physical
I
hand.
didn't
would-
want to go like this. Yeah, yeah.
And then after Rob's comment, we're gonna, I
Move on.
propose we close this public hearing.
I'll make it quick. I didn't think there were enough studies done of this project. So on my way to the dump this afternoon, I did a very thorough research job. And as I was driving down Beaver Meadow Road towards the dump, there were 4 cars coming my way, 5 people walking on the road. One of the cars was apparently operating at a somewhat higher rate of speed than the rest of the traffic would support. And I was concerned in that 4-minute trip about the safety of the people who are walking. So I certainly support moving forward on this.
Claudette, can I ask a question? I know you wanted to close.
Go ahead, Roger.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Were you done, Rob? I'm sorry. Did I interrupt you?
Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
So Herb, I had noticed in the Dubois and King that they summarized our meeting already, where it said that there was board and citizen interest in the mobility lanes, and that in the second study, there should be a consideration of how to have those bike mobility lanes or have more friendly bikeability into the plan. But like, how is that actually possible? I guess would be a rhetorical question for now, or because I want to respect Claudette's time, but like that is what I was like kind of like stuck on. Like clearly the whole purpose of this study was to identify an alternative, but yet there's a possible interest in 2 alternatives. And so like how, we have another public forum, so we can move on, but like that is something that I'm curious about, because ultimately sidewalks are symptoms of fossil fuel infrastructure, and I would like more bikeability. Thanks, Claudette.
Okay.
Another
You have another
hand up.
public comment though.
I'm going to take one more public comment, and then we are going to leave this agenda item. Shoshana?
Hi, I'm Shoshana Hort. I live at 149 Beaver Meadow Road. I was gonna, people know my support of this project. I actually live on the road, and I'm actually live on the west side of the road, so it would affect right in front of my home, but I'm very supportive of this. I'm an active walker and biker on Beaver Meadow, and I see the danger every day. I did want to just add though that I have to say, I don't think there's a lot of support from the mobility lanes, and I'm not supportive of the mobility lanes. For me, having pedestrians sharing a lane with bikers just seems really unsafe unless they're like 5 years old. So I guess, I know we did hear a couple of people mention that, but with most of the surveys that were done, we didn't really see that support. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll entertain a motion to close this public hearing. Mary?
I move to close the first public hearing to solicit input regarding the Beaver Meadow Sidewalk project and resume the regular select board meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. We'll roll call. Rob?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So thank you, everybody.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
just as a point of logistics, before everybody drops off, you are having a second public hearing on the same issue at your subsequent meeting on the 24th.
Right. Thank you for putting that out. And thank you, everybody, for participating. Moving on next to appointments. Is there a motion to appoint Chet Clem to the Upper Valley River Subcommittee of the Connecticut River Joint Commission?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And I was going to say, I thought I saw Chet. So Chet, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us why you're interested in this position?
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. Chet Clem, 1488 Beaver Meadow Road. On my second stint as a Norwich resident, having grown up on Union Village Road. This interests me both educationally. I have a BA in environmental policy from Bates College with a specific focus on river restoration, and professionally in my work in West Lebanon, which includes riverfront development and also the extension and expansion of the Mascoma River Greenway through Westboro Yard, through West Lebanon to points in White River, Hanover, and elsewhere. Grew up along the Connecticut River, love it dearly, and hope to do my part for it in this position, the town of Norwich.
Any questions from the board? And I see that Herb had noticed that there is no there are no set terms for this appointment. So if there are no questions, thank you, Chet, for applying. I know this has been vacant for a couple. Well, I think Melissa Horwitz was our last rep. So we'll roll call. Rob.
Yes.
Mary.
Yes.
Roger.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And again, thank you, Chet. Let us know if you need anything from the town, and if you could keep us posted about what's going on, that would be helpful too.
Absolutely. Thank you all. I appreciate it. I'm going to have to jump off. I've got bedtime to attend to, but thank you all for all that you do for the town.
Thanks,
Thank
Jeff.
you.
Be well.
Okay, our second appointment, is there a motion to appoint John Cushman to the Solid Waste Committee for a term to be determined? This, yeah, actually.
So moved. Yep.
Motion made by Mary. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Rob. This committee, hopefully with Jack, I think we'll have a quorum.
Quorum for solid waste.
Hey.
So I'd like to ask Jack to just introduce himself and tell us why he's interested.
Thank you, Claudette, and members of the Select Board. I'm Jack Cushman, 69 Meeting House Road. I heard some time ago that the town wanted a new member to join this group, and that indeed the group couldn't function without a new member. So it occurred to me that this was something that was within my abilities, and that I would be, if it's helpful to the board to have me join the group, I would certainly do so. I think you all know me and understand that my approach to this would be to listen to townspeople, to do what we need to do in the handling of our solid waste, to be responsible stewards of our waste stream, and that if not the beating heart and soul of Norwich, certainly the transfer station is an important part of our community, and I would take this on with the understanding that it would be helpful to the select board and to the town, and glad to help out in that way if I can. Thank you.
Herb, I see your hand up.
Sorry, before I lost the thought, I was thinking it might be a good idea, in addition to if you're appointing Jack and you have a quorum, that maybe your charge should include the Solid Waste Management District appointee as a member of the Solid Waste Committee. In this particular case, it would be Neil Fulton.
Okay.
Sidebar, I wanted to give that after the fact, but I figured there'd be more hands before you got to me, so sorry.
Any questions from board members? Not seeing any. Thank you, Jack, very much for stepping up. So we will roll call. Rob,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So, so there's, yeah, probably I will try to I'll offer to try to pull together the group and just at least get the first meeting started. Does that sound like a plan?
I
All
think
right.
there were two of us on the call. Andrew is here.
Yeah, yeah.
And certainly I'm at your convenience to get some marching orders.
Okay. Thank you again. All right, moving on to our next agenda item, the stop yield ordinance. Is there a motion to accept the second reading and adopt the Town of Norwich stop yield ordinance as contained in the packet?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Board discussion. Mary?
Just a comment. It was kind of shocking to me how many stop and yield signs had been added in the time frame. Just that they seem to creep in. And I think this is sort of a good piece of housekeeping to include them in the ordinance to describe what's out there.
Yeah, I was amazed to how many more were added, but any other questions, comments by the board?
I have a related question that's not about the ordinance itself, but is related to traffic, if that's okay.
Sure.
Thanks. So I guess the question is really for Chief Frank. Like, so what is the and if she's here, maybe she can answer, maybe Herb can answer. What is the definitive data set for information relating to traffic? Like, so I've always like gone to the crime research group under statute. But I know obviously people make use of town reports, which is like obviously data that the department pulls together. Are there like other state agencies that keep track of this? Like, what are some of the ways that people can, get the data, for whatever reason?
I see Chief has her hand up. So if you could respond, Chief, that'd be great.
Absolutely. In some ways, it's a difficult question to answer because each of the different entities that you listed gathers data in a different manner. For example, one entity that you listed gathers data by listing all of the warnings and tickets and assumes that those are the number of stops. The challenge to that is there are occasions where somebody might receive a ticket and a warning at the same stop. So you might have one stop, but two separate numbers. And so if you only added up tickets and warnings and added those together and assumed that, let's say there were 5 tickets issued, there were 17 warnings issued, do the math on that, that's how many stops. However, for our department, we list total number of stops, not specific to number of tickets and then we additionally break it down by tickets and warnings. So that might be that someone got stopped for speeding. They also had an expired license, an unregistered vehicle, and an uninsured vehicle. Not uncommon. We might give them a warning for those 3 things, which allows them a period of time to correct the violation. So we would have it listed as 1 stop, but we would have 1 ticket, 3 warnings. Whereas the crime center might have it listed as 8 stops because there are 8 separate entities. So the challenge with statistics are people can kind of make them say what they want depending on what they choose to gather for data. Typically, departments have the most accurate information because they're able to cull out that data a little more specifically. So it's a lot about who asks for the data. If you ask for just warnings, ask for just stops, or you ask for tickets. I'm not sure if that's helpful.
I think so too, because right, like there was that, can I follow up, Clem, if that's okay?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Because I think like, right, that recent Jim Kenyon article, like ultimately, I believe that his data set was looking at town reports, but like I imagine, I don't know, that these departments may categorize their work differently, but are also then required separately to submit their traffic data to the crime research group. So, so I suppose would we say that the most definitive authority on this information is the departments themselves?
It's difficult for me to answer for every department. I would say that if you ask the question the same to each department, saying how many stops, how many tickets, how many warnings, how many verbal warnings. So for example, in the town of Norwich, we do not do verbal warnings. And that's part of our agreement to accurately collect data from every motor vehicle stop. There are some towns, however, that issue verbal warnings. So there is no, if you were to only collect tickets and warnings, there would be no record of that stop at all.
Right.
So you would have to do other data. The other challenge you run into is when you start comparing towns, you may not have consistencies from departments.
Right.
I'll use our neighbor, for example, Thetford. Thetford is a department that has supplemental policing. So for example, while Thetford might have X number of tickets and warnings, they're also policed by state police because they contract out with Vermont State Police. So while Thetford might have issued X number of tickets or warnings, VSP might have also issued this amount. It's for the same area, but depending on how you ask the question, you might get different results.
Right. Okay, well, obviously, anyway, I have like I have a million other questions, but I think this is helpful for the context. We're about to prove like a traffic ordinance, so I think this is like a helpful baseline of knowledge. So thank you.
If I could just elaborate on that further, reference the question of the additional stop or yield signs. I just wanted to be known that we didn't add any stop signs or yield signs in any way by the police department. We just did an inventory and are accurately reflecting what was present. I know that that was stated before. I just wanted to reiterate that so there wasn't any confusion.
Okay, thank you.
And we don't get any local money unless we have an ordinance that's accurate, right?
Partially correct, but we get a portion of the funding. It just changes the allocation numbers.
Right.
Any other questions by the board? Or the public for that matter? Seeing none, we'll go to a vote. Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Madam Chair? Just
Yes, sir.
again, a process clarification. Now that you've adopted this, the ordinance, this is not like a policy with the ordinance. There will be a notice that will go in the Valley News and posted around. The ordinance will take effect 60 days from the date of today. And basically what that 60 days is an appeal period if somebody wants to submit a petition from that standpoint. So it's a normal ordinance process. So even though you've adopted it, I have to post it, and then there's a 60-day period of time that goes by. So the ordinance will take effect 60 days from now.
Thank you, Herb. I was actually just going to ask you what the next steps were. So thank you for clarifying that. Moving on to our next item, the proposed proposal for a task force addressing Article 36. And I submitted comments to Roger's original draft, and then this was supposed to, was it in the packet?
It was on page 178 in a
Yes.
revised packet.
Yep.
Okay, so.
Do you want me to walk through the changes, Claudette?
Yeah, that would probably be a good idea.
Okay, so based on, there were two big requests from our last meeting. John in particular said maybe think about reducing the membership from 9 to 7. So I did that. There was, I think, a member of the public, Jack Cushman, said, while this may address Article 36 and direct fossil fuels, which is mostly, of course, buildings and a fleet, you should provide a caveat to allow this group to think about other climate action work. And so under the initial work plan that is due to the board on August, it requires this group to do an audit of their work, which may include suggestions for future climate action work beyond Article 36. So those were those two things. Claudette was the only sole board member who sent me feedback, and so I incorporated some of her suggestions, which included a request to have these 7 members be appointed through our application process, not to come first with a recommendation by the town manager. That the intent of that was to just deliberately involve our TM, but I'm fine following our usual process. Then she also requested, and clarify, tell me if I'm wrong with my summary, Claudette. You also requested that we don't necessarily have to specify the background of our community members, and so I in turn made that a suggestion, right? So 2 community members appointed by the select board that may include an individual with a background in environmental justice and an individual with an experience in greenhouse gas reduction. It doesn't have to include that, but I think it's important to highlight that as possible expertise should we be able to get that, but doesn't require it. Other change, I think these were the only changes. I changed the update from July to August. And the only point of discussion, I guess, or one of the suggestions I didn't take from Claudette, because I thought we should talk about it, is she suggested not having 2 members of the Energy Committee, but rather 1 member of the committee and have a 3rd community member at large. But otherwise, everything else is the same.
Any select board questions? Mary?
Yeah, a few things. I've got kind of overall concerns about this and then sort of smaller questions about how it's set up. So if we have a member of the finance committee at this point, there's 1 person. Do we want to let that
There's
stand?
no finance committee. The finance committee doesn't exist. There's no
So
quorum.
we're striking that one, right? I'm
I
just
mean,
saying it's in there.
will the finance committee never again exist?
No, I'm just saying that in this draft, it says 1 member of finance committee. Should that come out?
I don't think so. I think, well, okay, sorry, I'm interrupting
It's just
you.
a question.
Yeah,
It's just a question, okay?
I'm gonna stop interrupting you. I'm sorry, Mary.
Well, that's all right. And then as far as the support that this committee will need, I'm a little bit concerned about our committees in general, where it says, this committee would be entitled to support from the town manager's office. And I'm concerned about that in general for all of our committees. But I think that support kind of has to be minimal, or the town manager's office, they're not going to be able to do their regular work. There's that. The other thing is that it seems to me, I've just been reading this over and over again, that maybe part of this is sort of gathering information, trying to make it streamlined, perhaps trying to have a dashboard so it's all in one place and we all know what's going on. And I think that's really commendable. And I think that's a good reason to do it. But I also think, I'm not sure it moves us toward deciding what we have to do for actual changes to make the reductions. I think it's really good. It's sort of like a management document. Let's get really organized. We all know what the data is. We share it. It's constantly updated. I think that's good. I don't know if it can be actually done, but maybe I'm, just skeptical on that. And the other thing is things like benchmarking. So if you are benchmarking, are you using things like oil bills? And that's sort of the first thing. If you get an energy audit, they say, well, what are your utility bills? And they look at them. So that I can see. But then, for instance, I know you don't like to hear Tracy Hall, but things like the actual configuration of the building does affect the oil bill. So things like the giant space inside the gym, the particulars of the configuration of the buildings, the condition of the buildings affect how you would address the deficiencies. And I'm not sure that a lay committee can really sort of address that. You know, just thinking of the particular needs that we have, the state that the technology's in, it's very bewildering. And I think that's probably why we're not farther ahead on this than we could be. But I don't see any harm in this, but I also don't think it's quite moving us forward. I've been a little bit uncertain about it. And I would like to hear, you know, from our people, from John Langus and Rob Gear, what they think about it from a, you know, internet technology standpoint, and also from the standpoint of just understanding what our needs are and what we might have to do to actually address those needs. I still have a ton of questions, and I'm not sure that this would answer it. So, and I appreciate also, Roger, the effort that you've put into this, because we've been drifting. And you put your draft out there, and it's always great to have a draft to work with. So I just wanted to say that.
So John or Rob, comments? John?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that last point there. Thanks for taking this. I think that my instinct would be to have this combined with the Green Fleet, whatever sort of structure that, like, I mean, it seems like we all know, right? Those of us who look at this at all know that the easiest low-hanging fruit is efficiency first, right? Beyond that, vehicles have come the furthest in most respects. Space, the heating of space is extremely hard, especially in the already built environment. And so having a green fleet is a fairly natural first, it's the only step we've taken, right? The only step we've taken since Article 36 has been to insist that we do a hybrid for the new police vehicle. The next police vehicle proposal we're going to see, I understand, has either a hybrid or a fully electric option. So that's great. So those are pieces. The geothermal one was more aggressive. It was more, it was focused on that hard item of space. But I think it makes sense to have, there's going to be a ton of overlap in the people that are interested in helping with the Green Fleet, and that would be helping in this. And yeah, I mean, I got to say, I like the idea of lots of people having feedback in that, as people coming to the meetings when they're interested in the meetings, but not that are required to have a quorum. I'm really worried about, you know, if we've got that many members, do we restrict ourselves and how often they're actually able to take action, especially because they're not going to be ultimately taking action. They're going to be having votes to recommend things to us. So I think that having, you know, a few voting members that are, you know, people that are actively soliciting participation at each of their meetings from volunteers who just want to show up and talk at the meeting would be my preference on that.
Can you clarify what your last point, John? I don't understand it.
So I would say 3 members instead of 9. I would
so right
say
proposed a 7. Okay.
What's that?
It's proposed a 7 now, the revision.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, because I'm looking at, I thought maybe I opened the wrong packet, but I'm looking at the revised packet and it still says 9. It's got these purple comments.
That's Claudette's contributions. That's also part of the packet. So maybe just scroll up.
I see. It's just
scroll up
further down. Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say 3 or 4. Well, 4 is always probably, well, not really. You're not gonna, if you have a split vote, you're just not gonna do something. So I would say 3 or 4 rather than 7, just to make that ease of operation a little better. and recognize that in this town especially, you will have people showing up to those meetings that are interested in it and interested in participating.
Did Rob want to say something?
Yeah, I think the importance of it is that it really focuses a group of people on an area that the community wants addressed, but we haven't had the time to really look at specifically. And so it's a really useful idea. Looking at the makeup and the recommended makeup, not requiring, say, 2 members of the Energy Committee, but not disallowing 2 members of the Energy Committee to participate. If there, I can see John's worry about the size and whether quorums will be troublesome and how much work they'll get done because of those requirements. I can see that's an issue, but it's really worth pursuing. That's it.
Mary?
I think I think we're going to need to have sort of more direction from the select board in addition to this direction. I think this is good. It's almost like a brainstorming sort of committee to get some ideas, maybe do some research on what's current and bring it back to us. But I don't think we can still drift along. There's going to have to be, I think, more of a direct action by the select board and not just say, okay, we got our task force, now I could put it on the back burner. I think I don't know what the actions would be, maybe focusing on the green fleet or making a priority out of the green fleet. But I just don't think it should drift. But on the other hand, and on the other thing that I wanted to reiterate what Jack Cushman said about possibly having shovel-ready projects in case there is some federal funding coming. If our geothermal project, perhaps it had some grant funding associated with it, it might have been more palatable. Although I think in retrospect, it also would have been good to take a more comprehensive look at the needs for Tracy Hall. If it's going to be renovated to the extent that you have to bring the ventilation up to code, then maybe it's a bigger project than we really thought in the beginning. So I would be looking to see if there are federal grants for vehicles or renovations, that sort of thing. I think we should be ready to anticipate how we could make use of such funds should they show up.
So it does say provide proposals, recommendations for the design of policies, programs, projects, and staffing for the modifications to existing. So, it's in there.
It's in there, but it will be stuck off in a committee. And I think it needs to be up front, like a big Post-it right in front of us on our refrigerators or wherever those important Post-its are. Keep it up front.
It's a good thing that a select board member is slated to be on the committee.
Well,
but
yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like who will want to shepherd this? Who will want? I see that little finger there.
Not it. Yeah.
Yeah. So someone has to be kind of its champion, I think, as well for it to work. So.
Yeah. And I kind of I'm hearing John's question or concern about a quorum. Somehow I'm not as concerned with this topic, but I hear John's concern.
About the quorum, you mean? You're not so concerned about the quorum issue? Is that what you mean?
Right.
Or
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering. Yeah. So I guess that's That's
The only
about,
thing, the only thing I'll add, if I may, is that a progress report is due in August, right? So if we like build this together, so there's a lot of suggestions, right? Like for benchmarking, for piloting programs, you know, all of which would be up to that committee to set in a term of priorities. But there's a couple of things that are required as a part of this charge for an August delivery, right? Communication plan for how this is going to work with this and the energy, like an energy committee and other committees, finance committee, like a communication plan across other committees. It requires to have a work to date on the town's greenhouse gas emissions. Some of that work has been done, but, you know, identify approaches to filling any missing data that was there. They have to define what constitutes a policy, program, or project. To your point, Mary, like this committee has to tell us like what is the scope of some of these things that will be on the ready. And then they have to do kind of like the child care committee, like ask a series of questions of what will make this committee successful. They have to audit the scope itself, perhaps as like their first thing that they do, and let us know if they want a revision of their charge or recommend a revision of their charge or what have you, which comes out of the spirit of recent hubbubaloo with our finance committee, right? So we're asking this group from the very get-go to audit what it is that they're asked to do.
Okay.
I see Linda Gray has her hand up. Go ahead, Linda.
Hi, thank you. Linda Gray, 175 Kerwin Hill Road, and on the Energy Committee. And I just want to, I want to echo, I appreciate very much Mary's comments about drifting. And I agree that there has been drifting on this topic, and I see the possibility of forming this task force as a way to take control of that and stop drifting if I feel like it's written with enough the language covers lots of options, and so I think it's fine. It doesn't need much revision. If you all are taking John's concern about the number of members to heart, a suggestion that you might do would be, well, given that there isn't an active finance committee now, you could drop one of those members, so that would take down one. And then if you wanted to, you could also just have it be one member of the energy committee, so that would get you down to 5. And if you felt that that was a better workable number of people, I think that would work fine. From my own experience, I feel like that it's really easy to participate in committee discussion and learn and stuff, even if you're not an official member of the committee. So the fact, if you drop that down, that's not a big deal, I don't think. So I would urge you to take action on it if you can come to agreement tonight, so as to get the ball rolling and to stop the drift.
I'd be supportive of that.
Pam has her hand up. Go ahead, Pam.
Pam Smith, 1445 New Boston Road. John Langus made the point that I was going to make, and that is that 80 to 85% of our fossil fuel usage is the fleet. So it seems kind of redundant to have a green fleet task force and an Article 36 task force. There seems to be quite a bit of overlap there, like 85% overlap. So I'm just wondering, does this really make sense, or should one of them go away?
Well, the green fleet's never actually gotten started, so.
Well, and we're 2 years into this Article 36, and there's never been a plan. So it's time for a plan. And then the question is it a green fleet plan? Is it an Article 36 task force plan? I think you need to pick one.
John, did you have a comment?
So I'd be happy to follow up on, and thank you, Pam, for your support of my point. I'd be happy to follow up on Linda's suggestion and formally suggest that we drop those 2, leave it at 5, And then, yeah, we just move forward with this one on the assumption that its first order of business is to come up with a green fleet policy. So we've been talking about both. Let's follow them up together. That takes it actually out of the town manager's hands because we had sort of tasked him with running that. And I think we all agree that he's got plenty to occupy his 8 hours a day. So it takes it off of his plate. And it gives the folks that want to do this something to really chew on right when they walk in the door and sit in the seats. So I'd be happy to support that and would support it tonight.
Cheryl, you had a comment?
Cheryl Lindbergh, 59 Koch Road. I just wanted to remind the select board that there really are 2 members of the finance committee left. I can serve, by my own choice, but Linda Cook did not resign. So there are at least 2 members, and we never know if it's advertised that someone else might choose to apply. So just wanted to mention that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would, I guess, I think it's like it's a little wild to have something like this and not include like a finance committee member, though the committee doesn't exist, right? So that's my only thing. Like you're like, what, like outside of the energy committee, like what is the, like, I don't know. I feel like we identified the planning commission, the energy committee, and the finance committee. In addition to us, I think those are the players. One could argue conservation, one could argue solid waste. I would argue that they're secondary, but like I think finance committee is pretty important. Unfortunately, everyone resigned.
Except for Linda.
Except for Linda, yeah.
Yes.
John?
I mean, I think that's a fair point, except for the reason that we don't have a finance committee is that there were never 3 of us that agreed with what the finance committee should do, right? So the charge was to advise on the budget broadly, but that was never fleshed out as a group direction from us. I really wanted to see digging in on the designated funds and drive the capital budget process. We didn't really have a capital budget process for them to drive and be part of this year. So I think that can always be incorporated later if we get that straightened out. But I wouldn't, I mean, gosh, I would hate to hold this up to wait for that to get sorted out for the second time in 4 years. It was pretty hard to try to sort it out the last time.
Mary?
Just to kind of build on that a little bit, and also on actually comments that Pam Smith has made, that this also has to do with capital planning, which we need to do because we have these capital expenditures for the future, and we have the maintenance of the ones we have now, and we have replacement schedules and so forth. But this will be a little different because the technology is changing. I mean, if we had a person that could be able to visualize what some of these changes would be. I don't know if that's a finance person, is there such a thing as a capital improvement specialist or a consultant? But it does have to do with capital planning, I think. I don't know who that person is, but.
So I'm going to go next to Jack since he hasn't spoken yet. And then I don't know if Linda, if your hand is an old hand, and Cheryl, if your hand is an old hand.
Thank you. And I'll be very brief. It does seem to me that any solutions or recommendations that emerge from a group like this would have to take financing the proposals into serious consideration. It's not going to be a proposal if it doesn't address the financial aspects, and financing of green energy projects is not a trivial issue. So I think that whether by naming a person to be on the committee or by making it clear that the committee has to work with, for other committees, sister committees, to coordinate, you certainly have to recognize the importance of finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Linda?
Thank you. On the point relating to the Finance Committee, under task force scope, the first thing is coordinate efforts with the other committees, including the Finance Committee. So I think the suggestion about dropping somebody was to respond to John's concern about the size of the committee, and the task force scope includes a directive to consult with the Finance Committee. So if the Finance Committee develops again, I think this task force has the charge to coordinate with it. So I think that responds to that overall issue now.
Yeah,
Pam?
and
Or actually, let me go to Mary first.
I'm wondering if on the, instead of saying a member of the Finance Committee, if we could just say a person with some financial background, to make it a little more general about where that person could come from would be helpful. Just so, and also to have that aspect of how the committee, how we'd like the committee to be structured, what kind of inputs, if we could just be more general about who that person is, like not necessarily a member of the Finance Committee, but someone with a financial background who could give some insight from that point of view. But it would be in the membership section.
Roger?
So a suggestion for that could be, so we have two roles that are suggested roles from two community members. We could say two community members and just add a finance background as an additional may include, right? So implying, like saying that we're looking for that as one of the areas of expertise, although it's never required, and then remove the Finance Committee and then remove one Energy Committee. So in other words, we'll still indicate in the charge that this expertise or this background is valuable for this project, but it allows us to have like 5 members. And then thank you, Linda, for engaging in the charge, which, as you say, it allows there's a liaison relationship that's required to as built into it. So my suggestion would be to add the Finance Committee, a finance background to one of the suggestions for the two community members.
Members.
Yeah.
Pam?
Go ahead.
Pam Smith, 1445 New Boston Road. Doubling back on something Mary said about the Capital Planning and Budget Committee, that was a recommendation from the Finance Committee that's been pretty much pushed to the back burner, if it's even on the stove. And I'm just thinking about Green Fleet committees and Article 36 task force and capital planning and budget committees, and what makes sense? Should we have 2 committees, 3 committees, or just one committee that kind of oversees all of this? Because as Mary said, that there's money that has to be committed to each of these solutions, whether it's buying a biodiesel fire truck, if that's the decision that's made, or all electric vehicles of some sort, whether they're police cruisers or dump trucks or whatever the technology is. That's money that has to be spent, and it comes under the capital budget. So does an Article 36 task force make sense, or does a capital budget committee make more sense? You get so many committees that it becomes unwieldy. Thank you.
Mary?
I think, I think that's true, Pam. I think it's, if we didn't have this sort of added urgency and of the climate change and this uncertainty of the types of technology, I think that will have to be developed to address it. I think it would be sort of more of a conventional, maybe more of a conventional capital planning procedure. But I think we do need some specialized knowledge to make the decisions in a capital budget format. So I think sort of, it's like having consultants who have some specialized knowledge about what could be specialized capital planning. So I don't think it's bad to have the task force. I wouldn't go all the way back to a conventional capital planning program that didn't have some sort of input of specialized knowledge for how we're going to do this. I think it's just slightly different because of what we have to deal with.
So I want to bring us back to the proposal that was made by Roger or by Linda or however, to decrease the membership to one energy committee member and to pull a finance committee member and add the finance qualification. And wondering if the board is willing to, if someone's willing to make a motion proposing that.
The other proposed change was to make the Green Fleet the first order of business. That was John's on the scope.
Yeah, in a way, I don't want to dictate.
You don't want to clutter it up with that, or
I would want the group to decide if that would be their first order of business.
Right. But we
I
should
agree.
strike a mentioning of the Green Fleet working. We may potentially strike the Green Fleet working group from this charge since it doesn't even exist.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So it would be more of a suggestion that would be, okay.
So is there anybody willing to make a motion? John.
I like the motion. So are we saying that we're okay to just say as amended though? Or are we trying to, in this motion, try to capture that?
I would try to capture it in the motion.
Capture it.
Okay. So I move to form an Article 36 task force according to the charge contained in the select board packet as amended to reduce the membership from 7 to 5 by striking the finance committee member and the
reducing the energy committee
membership from 2 to 1, and by stating a preference among the membership to include at least one member with experience in environmental social justice, finance or
No.
No, Zoom.
Come back.
Oh, God.
You broke up, John.
We know, but we know.
and climate mitigation. Am I back?
Yeah.
Am I back?
Yeah, it got broken up near the
You have
end.
to start over.
Yeah.
Keep those fingers away from the camera.
So experience in the heck did I say? Experience in finance or economics, climate mitigation and energy efficiency, and economic, social, or environmental social justice.
Yeah, that's it.
And to ask the town manager's office to advertise for applicants to such task force. Boom, mic drop.
Wow.
So for poor Miranda, who's taking this motion, the stuff about the suggested committee members was already in the draft. So the only addition actually, Miranda, that would be required is the finance committee background, because the other things that John said are already in the draft.
True.
So,
and I knew that when I said it, actually.
Okay.
So is there a second?
Probably not.
I'll second it.
Rob, seconded by Rob. And Miranda, I see you kind of, do you need a clarification on that motion?
Yeah, so thank you. So Roger, do I understand correctly that really the only stated amendment needs to be to reduce the members from 7 to 5?
Yes.
And to strike the finance committee member?
And to reduce the energy committee membership to 1.
Right.
And then to include a preference for financial background in the list of community members. And the other.
Okay. And to include at least one member with experience in finance?
That's what we're going to say. Yep.
Okay.
Sure.
In addition to other areas of experience?
And the other hardly anyone's expert in only one thing. So I don't know if you have to say it.
John mentioned economics as
All
well.
right.
I said finance or economics, but
How about
Okay.
political economy? That'll be great.
Oh,
Anyway,
yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I'm good.
Linda had her hand up, has her hand up. Go ahead, Linda.
Amanda Cook.
Hi,
Linda Cook, yeah.
Linda Cook, 147 River Road. Since you're opening the door and you keep talking Finance Committee, would this be the opportunity to also put out there an application for applicants for the Finance Committee showing that you are supporting going forward with it? And put that position back out on the web, see if we pick up people?
And that I was going to, when we get into March and April, when all of the reappointments and appointments are made, that would be that was my, I was going to, we would hopefully include it in that general posting of open positions.
I kind of thought it was just happening automatically, because don't we have just sort of a standing order that when we have openings on committees, we advertise for them?
It's almost
why would we wait?
Yeah.
We don't need to, but, so actually, okay, so, yeah, all right. Send out the open position thing for finance as well. So we have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, I'm gonna take a vote. Rob,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Roger,
yes.
John,
Yes.
and I'm a yes.
Where's my reaction emoji? Okay, there we go.
Okay, which brings us to our break. So it's 8:03. We'll be back at 8:13. Resuming the select board meeting for February 10th. The board is present, as is the town manager and his administrative assistant. Moving on to our next item. Is there a motion to approve the specifications and requests for proposals for Norwich real property reappraisal as contained in our packet?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion? I know the listers were asking us for feedback. I don't know if they received any. I know I did not send any in. Any board?
What, I guess, so I love it as like and I just, to be kept in the know, but why do we need to be asked to do this?
Cheryl had mentioned it in our.
Because this is like a motion, right? For something that is like an independent elected duty, right? Like, I don't know if I even want to make a motion about this.
Cheryl had mentioned at our last meeting why she was bringing this to the board. I hear your question, Roger. Cheryl, go ahead.
Cheryl Lindbergh, Chair of the Board of Listers, 59 Koch Road. I think the critical piece for the listers, we don't raise money. We spend our budget, but we don't want to be facing a moment where we have a reappraisal firm that we would like to hire and not have any money. And I think the select board is in charge of, making sure the funding is available. That would be my reason for wanting to be talking with you about this and making sure that we're in agreement. I feel really good that we would share, a communication like this and work together on it. So I think that's my position with this process. With that said, we did get some comments from Herb, and there's a couple things I would like to touch on. I guess you all saw those as well. And one of the requests we want to make sure we get is a copy of the purchasing policy, because I'm not sure we thoroughly looked at that in relationship to this, but I think we've got our ducks in order as to who we wish to advertise this to, and the plan, and it sounds like Herb is on the same page with regard to that.
Cheryl,
And I would just like Herb to kind of identify where he feels we might need to loop him into this procedure.
You want that now, Madam Chair, or?
Sure.
So essentially, your purchasing policy with the town manager as the purchasing agent, I necessarily need to be involved in the process, but I'm not. But keep in mind that our purchasing policy is really kind of written for me over in control of a lot of the stuff that goes on as elected offices of the lister. There is somewhat of a separation of power that's there, but overall, there are things. I'm not going to sit there and be really a part of their particular process, but they just have to loop me in as part of the process when you, especially in a formal sealed bid process. And I think it's important to understand that too, from the standpoint of the select board, that the select board is mentioned as part of that purchasing policy in the sealed bid process. So I do think it's important that they do keep you in the loop and that you do take action. And then of course I would be collaborating with the listers as necessary, but only to the extent that it relates to my office and the overall accounting and the process of a fair and competitive bidding process.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I just, I don't mean to put you on blast, Cheryl, but you're a signatory on our financial policies, like the master financial policies, like you're signed on that. So
yep.
Okay, so you suggested one to see the purchasing policy. So I just wanted to, you signed it, so.
I did, I signed that too.
Yes, you signed lots of things, but yes. Okay, sorry. Thanks.
Well, again, if it's on the website or somewhere, I mean, wherever it is, I just want to make sure we look it over. That's all. Was there any feedback with the contract? I know we promised that per request, and then with every intention to doing that, we wanted to get the RFP in front of the select board first. We went over the contract, we reviewed it. We're open to suggestions on that. If you've read it and have any, we're happy to include them if it's something that's important to the town. Do we want the town attorney to review it? I don't know. Maybe before we sign that kind of a contract or something, we'd have the town attorney review it, or maybe now. I don't.
Who'd the contract come from? It was extremely short, the contract. That was my main comment on the contract. It was pretty short.
So it was a part of a previous RFP that was done for reappraisal services, and we took a look at it and tweaked it a little.
So under Neil Fulton, sort of taking was it as far back as Neil Fulton or
yes, yes.
I see.
I would certainly, I mean, or VLCT, like there's going to be like, you know, several people in Vermont that will have a standard form contract for this that covers things like insurance and indemnities and stuff like that. That this kind of just said, you know, you agree to be bound by the terms of the RFP, and didn't really add much to that. So I would definitely recommend it. If that didn't go in front of a lawyer, I would definitely recommend that.
Okay. So anyway, just a quick aside, we did have a meeting today and we invited our district advisor to attend the meeting, and he provided us with a reappraisal checklist, which is really handy to have. Unfortunately, we didn't have it ahead of time, but now we do, and we can certainly review that and the steps that are being recommended. So we'll be making good use of that. There are steps that we have to follow eventually, but we're way ahead right now.
Okay, so other than making sure, but and the contract won't be part of the RFP. That's a separate.
Well, when it went out last time, it was a part of the RFP, and John mentioned that last time, and we hadn't gotten to those pages yet, so that's why it tagged along now. So it does usually go out with it, so there's a sense of what we're expecting for a contractual arrangement.
Okay.
Yeah,
so-
typically you would say that you're either going to agree to be bound by that contract, or you're going to, as part of your bid, make comments on it so we know what you want to see changed.
So then is it premature to vote on this tonight? Prior to
I'm
having-
with Roger on this. I appreciate the consultation, and I like that, and like the back and forth and being informed, but I don't see why we would need to vote on this. This seems beyond our scope of authority.
I just want to make sure that funding is something that's committed to, and that that was, the piece that I feel was important. But if you know we're going out to bid, and you know we're asking for funds to be set aside, and you're willing to continue with that, that's the select board's part of support that I would like to see.
I mean, that's pretty perverse, or maybe subversive. I don't know if it's perverse or subverse. Yeah, like I'm happy to like vote on a motion that like approves an RFP. I don't know. I'm sure through implication, I'm talking about that the money will be secure, but I guess I don't love the. I mean, I'm inclined to abstain if there's like all these hidden expectations outside of what's actually written. But
No, I don't want to have it sound like that, Roger. I'm really strictly stating that I think it's important that the select board is behind the need for a reappraisal. I think it's something that we are seeing, and I think you're going to see even more of a decline in the CLA, and the school board. They're asking, when is it going to happen? So
yeah,
I just want to see that there is a recognition that we're not going off ahead of anybody and, acting solo, and that there's an agreement there.
I'm just saying I would be voting to and approve an RFP as part of the purchasing policy for a formal sealed bidding process. Like that is what I'm voting on, just to be clear.
But
okay,
who's going to pay for it? I mean, is that
But
something
that's
you
part
feel?
of the budget, right? I mean, we put what we think needs to be put in that bucket in the budget. That's going to be voted on. We don't actually do that, right? We propose the budget and it gets voted on. We didn't allocate enough to pay for an entire reappraisal. We talked about that.
Right.
So, we've sort of formed our view of that as a board, and that is expressed in our budget, I think.
Okay.
So there is a motion and a second on the table. Mary, did you have a comment?
Oh, just, the discussion is somewhat confusing. So the motion is to approve specifications and requests for proposal. So I don't think we're talking about budgeting at all. It's just the specifications and RFP. I mean, it seems, I'm not sure really why we do it, except maybe it's reassuring.
Part of the purchasing policy.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
All right. So because we have a motion and a second on the table, I'm going to call the question. Roger.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Mary.
Yes.
John.
Abstain.
And I'm a yes.
I have not studied that proposal. I'm definitely not endorsing the specifications of it.
Okay. Next
All right,
item on
thank
the
you.
agenda. What? Sorry. Okay. Is the town manager's report. Herb, do you have any verbal updates?
The main verbal, I was late in sending town manager report out to you. It was just earlier today. So if you haven't checked your email box, please check that. it's a little bit different than the normal town manager report that you get because it's a little bit more inclusive of the past year's activities and as it's juxtaposed with a personal improvement plan. And then the only other thing I really wanted to update you on was the recent email that we just got from Representative Congressman Welch's office with regard to the funding that is potentially coming to Norwich, which is a significant sum of funding when you look at the spreadsheet. And I've already reached back to the congressman's office to say, what is it that we may need to do in order to be prepared for that funding to come. And it'll be funneled once, if it goes through this Friday is the oversight committee basically tossing it out. So there'll be more details after this Friday's reading, for lack of a better term right now. But once that stuff comes out, I think the distribution of the funding will probably come through the Agency of Commerce and Community Development through the Community Development Block Grant Program. So I'm trying to figure out, so I'm looking to see what we might need to do to be, shovel and stick ready to be able to ensure that we get all the funding that may be delegated for us. And then lastly, I sent an email late yesterday with regard to where the process is right now, or the anticipated process that I have with regard to the hiring of a new police chief. So if you have questions on that, let me know.
Okay. And just to clarify, the material from Congressman Welch's office relates to President Biden's 1.9 trillion, or however many zeros behind COVID-19 proposal, and the Budget Reconciliation Act that Congress is now debating. And so.
Right, and right now we're looking at about $600,000 to $700,000.
All right. And there is I read your email briefly. There's a webinar on Friday.
I guess it's not, when I reread this stuff, it's not really a webinar. It's really just the ability to follow the live stream following through YouTube or the committee website on the House Oversight Committee's discussion.
Okay, it's moving it out of committee and.
Yeah,
okay.
so I thought it was more a webinar process, but I think it's just the watch the U.S. representatives live type thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any questions for the town manager?
Oh, and the town report has gone to the printers. So last year that came back pretty quickly. So maybe by the end of next week, some of that stuff will be available.
Okay.
Do you want to, I don't know, Claudette, if you would entertain this question, because it might take us places. But I was wondering if we could get a quick update on the finance office, Herb. I don't know some of
Sure.
the.
So we do have, thanks. So we do have, sorry, there's a lot going on in the office right now, and the town report is really, that's all I've been doing for 2 weeks. So so the finance office, where we sit right now, is that we do have a temp on board, Seth Robertson. He has been set up through his company, Robert Half, with a laptop. He is connected to our server, Nemrick, and email type stuff. He has been giving the initial, besides becoming familiar with our system, the initial couple tasks that I've given him to do, trying to stay at the higher level functions, while Becky continues to maintain the day-to-day, is to focus on the monthly reports and any other form of reporting, to try to make those more meaningful and understandable, for lack of a better term, for the board and for anybody that's interested in those things. And then also to be taking a focus on our policies and procedures, especially the procedures, so that we can ensure that we continue to have strong financial controls and updates as necessary and applicable. And then as we move along, we'll get into some of the other higher function related stuff. But that's really what I'm trying to do, is get some of the instability restabilized, and most especially as that pertains to the relationship between the town manager's office and the board. And then obviously others that are involved, if there was a finance committee with that, with Cheryl and the town treasurer. So hopefully we're getting our higher function back to a level of stability.
Any other questions for Herb? Okay. We'll move on to our next agenda item. The Police Department cruiser proposal. Herb, I'm not sure if there is, if you could tee this up, I guess.
Sure, thank you. So to tee you up, I'd like to be able to have the driver, but I think we're going to use the Freewood for today. So what I had hoped that we could do is to have an actual proposal before you for tonight. But what I really want to do is to allow the chief to go through where she's at with regard to the proposal. Because essentially where we're at is that we can provide a proposal. Clearly, we can do that for the hybrid. We can start to do it for a new style of all electric vehicle that's being produced specifically for police, and that's forthcoming. And then the Tesla that we had talked about, there's a level of problematic stuff that goes to that, where the chief is not comfortable at this point recommending going a Tesla side, and she can explain some of the issues with regard to that. It's not saying we can't go that way, but it's hard to put a comparison proposal together at this point with a particular Tesla and to a degree with the new EV that's coming out. But what we're trying to do tonight, rather than give you a proposal, is to give you the introduction of where we're headed. And then at her last meeting 2 weeks from now, before you, hopefully we'll have at least the makings of a better proposal for you. So Jennifer, if you don't mind, Madam Chair.
Please go ahead, Chief.
I do have one slide. If I can share my screen, I will talk through it for anybody who is on the phone, so they should be able to view it. I will offer a share screen consideration. And please let me know if it's successful in the sharing.
Yes, we can see. Gotcha.
Thank you. So I truly believe that any job doing is worth doing well. I spent a considerable amount of time researching police cruiser considerations, being mindful of Article 36, our Green Fleet considerations. The considerations you're looking at before you include fully electric and hybrid vehicles. There's some implementation and some learning that we're still working on. One of the reasons that I did not feel comfortable putting a proposal before you is that there is a little bit of a challenge with direct comparisons right now. One of the challenges for that is that some of the elements just don't have numbers. And as you've seen previously, when we produce the fleet, we literally put it down to what each component costs, because vehicles have several upfit elements that do play a role in the totality of the cost of a vehicle. What I wanted people to see in general, and for the board to see as well, were the considerations we were looking at. One is a Tesla model. There's a lot of different styles, S, Y, X, etc. But I wanted to use something that was comparable across the board. The other is the hybrid Intercept, which we're familiar with. That's what we just recently purchased. That was authorized back in 2019. And then the new one is something called a Ford Mach-E. It's an all-electric vehicle that's similar to almost like a Subaru crossover in appearance. It's a combination of a sedan / an SUV. If you'll notice here, the different initial MSRP costs, the challenge to some of these is they're not 100% comparable because there are differences between the vehicles, but I tried to strip away any cost differences to give you the best initial comparisons. One of the reasons we're struggling, and some of the primary focus for law enforcement when we start to look at the differences, and the vehicles. One of those issues is ground clearance. As many of you have known, driving on some of our roads, it can be challenging due to potholes or some of the snow slush and some of those other elements. And so ground clearance can sometimes play a really significant role in law enforcement, as we have to be out in some of the difficult weather, oftentimes before roads can be plowed. And that ground clearance makes a big difference. The Tesla, as you'll see, was a 5.5, the Mach-E is a 5.7, and the hybrid Intercept is a 7.4. And I apologize, I should have specified. The Ford Mach-E is brand new. It has not actually been produced for purchase yet. There are pre-orders available. However, Lebanon Ford has one coming in this week that we will be able to see and test drive to get an idea if it's something that is workable. It's an all-electric vehicle, so as far as comparators, it's probably most comparable to the Tesla over the hybrid Intercept. Some of the challenges we looked at, for example, with the Tesla model is the service requirements and some of the limited number of service technicians available for the Tesla. After speaking with 7 different agencies that were all had utilized the Tesla in one capacity or another, service seems to be the challenge. Some had stated that they were waiting anywhere from 3 to 6 months to receive their vehicles back because of the lack of services. In addition, for us, the challenge to that would be having to go to New York or Massachusetts for service, which has some natural overtime challenges or overnights, and having to have 2 people drive down to leave a vehicle and then going back. So there's some challenges with that, but that will change over time. We anticipate that we will start to see more service technicians in the region. Some of the other differences for the vehicles, and this is probably the most significant for law enforcement, is the front hip width. The challenge is the operator's seat. For the hybrid Intercept, it's a 59.3. For the Tesla, it's a 53.4. I left the Ford Mach-E because it's in the middle of those. You start to look at potentially up to a 6-inch difference in the hip width. While that may not matter to some, the duty belts on the police officers extend significantly over the hips on both sides, and the contours of the seat can make that a challenge. The additional component might be the rear legroom. The least of those was at 35.2. The largest was 40.7. That addresses having to change out rear seats and creating a more comfortable environment for somebody who might have to be transported in the rear capacity through that. The last is range. That's just the electric battery potential mileages that are listed. Those are some of the fleet considerations we're looking at and trying to find service centers that might be available through that. The other challenge that we're looking at is something called officer consistency, being able to have all of the response elements in the same place. A short version of that would be saying, when I had to respond to an overdose, for example, this afternoon, and when I went, I had to utilize our emergency signals, which included an audible alert and a lighting alert. Knowing where those where that is located in the vehicle without having to look, because you're having to drive at a fast rate in order to get there because there's a life safety issue, without having to change regularly, is a concern we have. The benefit potentially of the Ford Mach-E would be that it would still allow us to use the Ford console in the same shape and format because after having conversation with 2 of our upfitters, they both said that the same console that was utilized in, for example, our hybrid could also be utilized in the Mach-E. Last but not least, just kind of as a few things, trying to address that would be the rear seat compartments and some of the lights and wiring. There is a little bit of concern regarding how the wiring might set up for some of these vehicles, and we're working with our upfitters to try to get costs. They're a little hesitant to give us installment costs though, because they have not installed emergency service lights in many of these vehicles. So I did not want to, I didn't want to give a half-baked proposal. I wanted to make sure that I could equally compare them across the board, taking into account all the considerations. In addition, with speaking with each of the different departments across the board, it's also difficult because they use them in different ways. Many of the departments use them for parking enforcement vehicles. Some use them as, for example, a sheriff who might only do administrative tasks but not patrol tasks. Others use them in Southern Florida, where they have different types of needs than we have here. So because of that, I wanted to make sure that I could present to you something that was a fair and accurate account of all of the vehicles comparatively. And I just wanted you to see the best I could present to you consistently are some of the examples that I listed above, but there's so much more to do, and numbers that are a challenge because in one case, the vehicle isn't even available for production yet, but is anticipated to come out soon. Lastly, as you'll note, we had received permission in August of 2019 to get the vehicle. It had not arrived until end of December, early January of 21, and gets lettered the third week, I believe, of March of the current vehicle that we have. So fully understanding that there is an extended delay in obtaining the cruiser, getting it upfitted and getting it marked, we know that some of these answers will come long before that as we're in production. John?
Thanks, Chief. That was super detailed and super helpful. Just a quick one on your comparison as the hybrid intercept, because that's the one we just bought. On those two key numbers you talked about, the rear leg room and the front hip, how do these two electrics compare with the regular cars that are our other couple of vehicles, as opposed to the big Ford Explorer?
So we currently have two sedans. One is the vehicle for the police chief, and then the second one, I will have to pull the numbers for what that intercept looks like, or excuse me, for what EQ1 looks like for numbers. The numbers I have are the SUV comparators, so I don't know what the difference is. The intent initially for us was to allow for the increased space. We had moved to phasing out of the sedans, so I didn't have the additional research for that, because when we first made them, they were no longer going to be offering sedans. But I can certainly research for you what the difference is on a sedan versus the Tesla or the Mach-E.
Okay, thanks.
Chief, I don't know if you can see me, Claudette. Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So I guess my question, so how do I'm trying to understand these fleet considerations in the realm of capital assets, right? Because obviously a cruiser is a capital asset, but it has less of a life than, say, a retrofit of a building, right? So how do we have you thought, do you have any perspective on the life cycle costs of these three models, Chief? I guess I guess that would be hard to determine because one of them is not available to the market. But can we get more out of one over the other, I guess, is a broad question.
I think I think you were correct that it's probably difficult to answer. In fact, as you'll recall, when we presented the hybrid to you, it also wasn't in production yet. Yeah. And so we were purchasing a vehicle that had yet to be, or proposing a vehicle that had yet to be made. The best I think we might be able to do would be to look at resale values of similar non-law enforcement related vehicles. So looking at a Tesla that was not a police rated vehicle, looking at, this is difficult. This is Ford's first fully electric vehicle. So I guess I don't know what those answers are going to be as to what their resale value is.
And
I don't know that anybody could answer.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I guess my follow-up question then would, do you have a sense of the deliberative process that other departments in other towns have gone through to arrive at these purchases?
I spoke with 7 different departments. 4 of the departments I spoke with stated that they were doing that as an attempt to meet similar to a green fleet policy to meet the efforts of their community, and that they were doing them on what they called a trial basis. We're going to try it. We're going to see if this works, and if we have success, we'll continue forward. 2 of those departments mentioned that they had success, but they were going to be doing basically a split division, recognizing that while it met several needs, there were still some needs that were unmet, so that they would have to kind of use a partial full electric vehicles, but also partial electric vehicles or a hybrid style, because there were some needs that were not being met by the full electric vehicles. Some of those might be, for example, sending officers to trainings or to some of the other elements.
So is there a risk that some of these purchases may not meet your needs, or no, you're fairly confident that they would meet the department's needs?
As we're using since we reference capital assets, I think we have the fortunate benefit that because we do have old vehicles, we have some of the other vehicles that would carry us through in the interim regardless. Using something along the lines of a 5, 6, and 7 year replacement plan, I think we have some allowable time to figure out next cycle through if this worked or if it didn't. But we wouldn't suddenly be without vehicles because we do have 2 current vehicles that we're cycling through. And one of those, again, the reason I didn't say 3 is because one of those will be phasing out once we have full vehicles, just to be clear.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? I can't see everybody, so if you.
I'm sorry, I can stop sharing my screen. That would probably be helpful.
So have we considered the possibility, well, then I can think of one real good reason not to, but have you taken any consideration in the electric pickups that are coming down the line? Some of which are pretty high performance and could be interceptors, but certainly would have good ground clearance and so on. I can see right away one of the first ones to hit is a Rivian starting at $72,000. So maybe if you didn't get leather seats or faux leather seats, you'd be okay. But there's a race to get ruggedized pickup trucks that would likely also be pretty fast. So we want to keep our eyes on that as an option.
Yep, absolutely. We're looking at all these new considerations as they come through, and also trying to. One of the challenges that that Norwich faces is because oftentimes we have a single officer on shift. We have to consider transportation as well, and so we carry much of our equipment with us because unlike some other departments, for example, Hartford next door, they can have 2 or 3 officers respond to a call, which means if they're in need of something, another officer, could transport it to them. For Norwich Police Department, we have to carry our gear with us because we don't have necessarily another support unit. So one of the challenges of the pickup truck does potentially become gear transportation and also having an interior transport for folks that needed to get from point A to point B. But again, you do have the bed of the pickup truck, but then the question becomes, is the bed useful then if you have to store it full of police equipment? So we're looking at all those different considerations. The reason I chose the 3 here was I tried to find things that were as similar as possible, even though technically the hybrid Intercept is an SUV, the Mach-E is a crossover, and the Tesla is more sedan-like. So I tried to kind of show those, but I can certainly do some research on the truck and add that to the consideration list as well.
And I think too, if I may, like, I think this is I think this presentation in this like research, I think is like clearly, a standard for what might be expected out of department heads who would be tasked with like a green fleet. And so I think then the question on a policy level becomes, maybe we have some benchmarks, right, to use an earlier word that came up, that require electrification of like Norwich, proper's fleet. And so it might become the case that if other departments are doing this level of research, we might not begin electrifying the police department before some other things. If there's a truck, right, that like is more suitable, we might go that route. We might electrify something, in another department before cruisers. And so I think like this is an example of like what the work of a department head would need to be done for the policymaker, right? And so John's nodding his head, so I think he might understand what I'm saying. But I think when we hear Green Fleet, and the only action that has been taken is like the work of the police department, and that doesn't necessarily have to be we don't have to we could buy a hybrid or maybe even not a hybrid if we're getting benchmarks from other vehicles. You know what I mean? So I think this is an example of like the department work here is like a good model for our community. So thanks.
I understand that, and the chief, I will say, is an exception to the rule in many cases, and this is a good like when she put together the comparison of a regular vehicle to the hybrid, and we opted to go with a hybrid, that she did her due diligence to even get down to the carbon footprint, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that when we went forward with the DPW vehicles some time ago that that was definitely a consideration, that we also did examine used vehicles as a stepping stone potential or an interim to getting some new vehicles. And there was some considerable research that was done by the mechanic and the department head to try to find that kind of stuff. So the message is definitely heard from the past, and I'm implementing that as we go, with or without a policy from that standpoint. But you're definitely heard in terms of, as we continue to move forward, you know, these comparisons and check-ins with other communities, as a for instance, is invaluable.
I guess, yeah, and my final thought is, if I may, is I just don't want the only information I have on electric vehicles from the town of Norwich as a policymaker is work from the police department. And like you implied that there was like some level of research done in other departments. Quite frankly, I don't recall that. And it's not an effort to like pin our amazing department heads in some green fleet contest. Like, I'm not implying that at all. It's just that I don't want to work in a vacuum when we're talking about electrification of our fleet. And like, maybe it's the case that, like, you know, police cruisers are the only thing that we really have to consider on the market. But, you know, I don't know if that's true anymore, right? Considering that there's such lead times. So I just don't know what you don't know. And so I'm making now a rhetorical point, and I'll step back. So thank you.
Yep. Mary, did you have a question, comment?
That's just a comment that I really appreciate the research, the comparison, and also that things may change over the next year or two. I would be kind of horrified if something as mundane as the clearance was something that made a police vehicle unusable. To take a call that we made a big push for an electric vehicle and then it got stuck going to a call, I would feel terrible about that. And also, you know, the consideration for the width of the seats. What is practical for our police officers when they're required to wear that gear? So there's sort of a balance between the efficiency and the electric, you know, the climate saving measures of an electric vehicle, but they're also just the kind of minimum practical requirements of a police cruiser that I think should not be lost sight of. There's some kind of balance there.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Seeing none. Thank you, Chief and Herb. I appreciate the work as well. Wagner, did you have?
Did they have what they need out of us, Herb and the chief? Because there was a suggestion that like this was to present information to like have perhaps a later proposal. So implying that like feedback was needed.
Yeah, I think there's still, the idea is that we would still come forward with a proposal in the future, but we really wanted to give you some of the, you know, we've done some analysis. There's some issues that we've run into, and we want to make sure we gave you an update rather than just deleting it from the agenda.
Okay, cool.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, the concerning thing, not only with the clearances with the Tesla, is the servicing.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
That's huge.
We have a power.
Keep in mind, there's a lot less servicing. You don't change oil on an electric vehicle.
Yeah, yeah.
I have had my Tesla for 18 months now, and I haven't serviced it at all.
It's not very green to drive to Massachusetts, though, John, for your service.
Technicians for Teslas tend to come to you usually.
Okay. Cool.
Ah, interesting. Okay, so moving on to the town meeting presentation. Roger and I have been working on this. We just wanted to give you a glimpse of where we're at and solicit comments, feedback. And John?
What's that picture on the last page? Is that actually somewhere in Norwich? I was looking at it and I couldn't figure out where that was.
Yeah, it's of Norwich. It's the gateway, I think they call it.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. There was.
I don't You'll have to share your screen with me to see that. I can't recall.
I
In
can,
the
The
area
last picture.
photograph?
From, it looks like it's from over where Southworth used to be.
Yeah, you can see, oh, that one?
Oh, no, that one, wait, that one.
The black and- Yeah, that's the
Oh.
gateway and it's the apple orchard. It's sort of odd, though.
Oh, the other side, yeah.
Yep. You can see where they used to call it Norwich Plain, except it's sort of grown in. A
And
little flat areas.
and these are John Pepper's photos. I should email him and ask if it's okay that we use them.
You should, but he won't mind.
Yeah.
Especially if you give him a credit.
Right. Yes.
So does, looking for feedback, you guys.
You want to
Do you want us to run through the slides real quick?
Yeah, well.
Sure,
yeah.
I thought they were really good, but yeah,
I like the budget process one.
very important.
Okay, so.
So I guess, and so do we agree on these, like this was our budgeting priorities? Do we agree that's what our priorities were?
I think so.
And then these have some typos, but this just addressed the budget priorities.
Yeah.
Are you just sort of flipping around or what are we doing here?
I am. If no one has any pointed feedback, I was just scanning through.
Yeah, I was
what?
gonna ask for the original keynote or PowerPoint slides because my neck sort of got a little bent out of shape as I was trying to read some of these things in the PDF. So
yeah, I can send the PDF and the keynote.
You guys know that there's a missing percentage on the salaries and benefits represent X%, right?
Yeah, it's a TK number. Yep, because I have to look it up.
The graphs that have the sort of trends over the past 5 years or so needs to be updated. Do you have data to update them with?
Herb provides them for me, and he just finished the town report, so I'll be reaching out to him for that data.
Okay, so I think graphs are quite good to convey information. We do have the one that shows the designated funds and how they went down again, which I always think is the most dramatic one. That one in the bottom. So we're not proposing that it comes up much. And that might be inadvertent in our case, or, I don't know if we really grappled with how to get back up out of that hole.
Well, I think
we decided we're not in a hole. I thought we decided we're comfortably within the band.
Well, what about this graph then? What do you make of it? Like,
sorry. I was thinking undesignated fund balance. Sorry.
Oh yeah, no, the undesignated fund is great, but on our designated funds, it kind of dipped down. So I don't know if we really talked about how to get it back up without having huge increases. So I don't know, it's a question of mine.
I mean, I think the narrative. So I think the other thing is these slides will be updated, but John is the presenter of the content, so he will be using these slides, right, a little bit. So I think the narrative for future budget governance could be taken a little bit from Herb's town report on the budget, where, you're looking at operations, which the total budget is going up 6.4%, but in operations it's going up 3%, which actually is arguably on track. Like one could argue that's on track with, standard rates of inflation, but your designated fund appropriations are increasing. And depending how we narrate that, right, one could argue that designated fund appropriations are a form of financing for our capital budgeting. And so you could say that with a newly identified capital budgeting needs, like those designated fund appropriations increase. That could be one narrative, but I don't know to what extent we want to write that up or talk about that, or allow John to use the chart as he will.
Well, I think too that when you're talking about financing of capital expenditures, I mean, you can either do it through designated funds, or you could just sort of let things deteriorate and then finance them at the last minute. So I think it's been a long-standing and I think very prudent practice to have the designated funds. But what I'm talking about is just that we had that storm. We were nervous about the, being able to finance the actual repairs that had to be made at the moment, how we were going to do that. So we kind of delved into those designated funds, for better or worse. We got all the repairs done, we were reimbursed, but it's how to bring that back up and how to do that without huge increases and how to make it understandable to the public about that decrease and the need for an increase to those funds. I think that's kind of important personally, whoever does the narrative, but I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, I think the point is exactly correct, and I think it's worth a sentence or two to remind people of the history of where we are, and we basically had a $500,000 storm, right? It was really a $3 million storm, but our share was 500,000. That's a pretty big hit. So we're climbing out of it, but we're not out of that hole yet. And in the meantime, we've stayed within budget every single year, and we've kept our undesignated fund balance where we've said that we need to keep it to guard against future emergencies.
You're welcome to plagiarize stuff out of my town report.
Yeah, I think there's actually a lot there, so it might be, I don't know if we wanted to go back and do that. But I guess one of the things, and should I keep talking? I don't have to keep talking, Claudette. Do you want to?
Go ahead.
Okay.
You're
Sorry.
doing a good job.
Okay, so I think one of the, like, here we say a point about the budget. Are there other budget items that board members would like to point out? So we go through and explain what our budget priorities were, and then we use these slides, these side-by-side slides, to talk about some like overall budgetary things to keep in mind. One of which is salary and benefits represent, like, I think it's like 80-something% of this budget, right? I'll get the number. And so they're just to communicate that, there's core ongoing outlays to this operational budget. Is there anything else that we wanted to point out about the town budget to our community? I'm taking Herb, last year, Herb pointed out that, like, due to like a lot of training and some other initiatives from his office, we had insurance rates go down, and that was something we pointed out. So is there something we want to point out in this?
I would suggest that you talk a little bit about the finance department and the fact that you elevated the finance assistant to a full-time, and that at least right now the finance director remains at a full-time rate, but at a higher, you've allowed for some additional budget money to accommodate that.
Okay.
And you did take the laborer position out of the DPW budget.
Okay.
So I think you have a slide about the spending for technology upgrades. Is that true?
Yeah.
Pretty sure I saw one. So do you want to just say a little bit about the need for that? In other words, I don't think we've had a big update on that in years, but I'm noticing, I think there is a real need for that to avoid the data breaches and so forth. It's prudent, but it also is new. But it also is something that the state apparently is looking into, because they have very, very old internet structure. So, it's just an awareness thing. It's like, I think the budget, it talks about values. So like the designated funds, it's like, okay, think ahead, try to plan ahead for when you replace your fire engines or whatever. And since the internet technology is so essential to running everything, that maybe we lose track a little bit of the need to maintain it, but that it is important, both for functionality, but also for security. So
are you suggesting, Mary, that that's part of the, that we put that in that slide that Roger was asking, that one?
It might go just if whoever is the narrator, I assume it's John all the way through. I forget how we decided that, but just to mention, just to talk it up a little bit about the internet technology upgrades. It's probably in that slide.
Yeah, one of the things that we haven't done yet is put the narrative to match the narrative to the slides. We haven't done any narrative yet.
So I can, on slide 13, like I can, so I think the way that this is set up is you outline to your community what the budget, after you talk about the budget process, you talk about your budget priorities, and then you have a slide that just has a sentence that talks more about that budget priority. And then in these side-by-side slides, it's to like pop out like additional explanations. And so I can, rather than just calling the IT stuff a budget priority, I could have something that like is more specific to, like, we can talk about workstations or what have you, or something like that in these side by
Yeah,
side.
I think it doesn't have to be too granular. I think people's eyes will glaze over if you do,
Yeah.
too much detail. What do you think about, I mean, this is this year's budget. You think it's appropriate to have some kind of statement about future budgets?
Yeah, that seems like it would be smart. Or to look at, yeah, okay, there it is. Hey, Hank, you should read
No,
that,
but
right?
Do we read our
Alright.
packet, y'all? I love you guys. I like it.
just want to make sure it's all in there. I mean,
But
Roger, you're flipping all over the place here. So I know you've thought it all through and it seems to make sense. I just want to double check to make sure it's all there. And I did
So-
read it a couple
since I didn't read it very comprehensively at all, do you have a slide similar to this that I think a point that's important to make is that by chopping too much off of this year, we're just setting ourselves up for higher costs in the years to come. That we paired it pretty lean, and going much further is not cost effective over the long term.
And that would be a
maybe-
slightly, whoop, go
Maybe
ahead.
question that premise is the person who has to say that. I mean, luckily I won't be in
Oh, yeah,
person,
okay.
so I won't be
Oh,
actually tarred or feathered, but
Right.
to say that the 6.5 is the, cutting down to the bone budget,
Well,
it's the biggest increase we've had in the time that I've served on the select board.
I know. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think the stabilization is certainly a point that we all shared together when we talked about it. We talked about the impact of such a huge percentage of the budget being personnel, and that you really actually want those to increase each year because you're paying for that experience, that loyalty, that institutional knowledge, all that stuff.
I mean, if you look at, so I think what this slide tells you, right, and depending on what your narrative is that like even in moments of like increases, they're not far off to like past increases. So I don't have the latest data, but like, if you're looking at operating, it's a slight increase. Like, in other words, like you're not seeing what you have in 2012, but even then that was a symptom of moving around some designated funds.
No, that was, no, 2012 was salary bumps for everybody.
Wasn't it also the designated funds where things were moved from operating into designated?
No, I think mostly that was sort of bringing salaries out of a kind of a, what do I call it? Too meager, a salary scale, just to bring a lot of them up at once. That was a Neil Fulton move, which is probably fair, but that was a big bump. But I agree, the rest of it looks pretty smooth.
Herb, do you have any thoughts? Because to be truthful, this slide was developed after I had a conversation with you last year when I like made this presentation. And so there were some arguments that we wanted to make with this slide. And I think you expressed them more eloquently. So like, can you tell us what they are? And then we can let you know if we agree with you.
So the purpose for this particular graph, which again is sort of, I've shared with you in the past, I think my current report is intended to continue to highlight the issue, is that the increase in the budget really has been, in the last couple of years, has been not a function of operations, but really where you've been with regard to your designated funds. The July 1 storm, honestly concerned the board that we weren't going to be able to get our reimbursement in as timely fashion as we did, because the track record of Tropical Storm Irene and 7 years of repayment, what might have been too burdensome for the community. So you opted to cut back on the designated funds for the last, for this particular year. The major, chunk of the essentially half of that 6% is related to replenishing some of those designated funds and incurring a little bit of new debt because of the Brown Schoolhouse bridge, and then also the little bit of the overages with regard to the new building constructions. The continuation of operations is still there at, basically 3%, and that's really a function of your CPI. The CPI is 1.62% for the coming year. And it's really basically, if you look at it, it's 1.6.2% for CPI, and then the step increase is equivalent of the same. So that's where you get 3%. And I think that it's a level of stability of existing services. The designated fund is, you're trying to replenish them a little bit. Now with the budget that if it goes, that's approved, you'll be at 75% of historic levels of designated funds. But you've also said as part of the process, we're not yet sure that we're going to get up to full replenishment without some reasonable analysis of our designated funds. What are the limits that we really need, rather than necessarily just replenishing them every single year with $20,000. Instead, you want to look at it, have some input, say with the finance committee, what are the things that we're looking at in our capital budget? What are our true designated fund needs? But in the interim, you've decided, yeah, we do need to come back up out of that July 1 scare and get the designated funds more in tune with where we need to be.
And I think that could be a somewhat positive narrative, that we got hit pretty hard and we dealt with it. And now we're trying to build back, like the undesignated fund is healthy, and we're trying to get our designated funds back up, and we're partway there. So that could be a positive, I think, statement for the narrator to make, which is good.
I think the other thing that board members ought to do too, just is to get, in giving Chris Katuki a little credit, I think when he first came out with his observer thing on when I first proposed the budget to you folks, he captured pretty well what I was trying to do, and I tried to reiterate that my perspective in my town report as well, in that any normal situation, I'm not going to give you a 15.5% or a 20% increase in the budget as my recommendation. There's clearly some discussion that I wanted to have with you folks in that particular process, to be able to not just have a discussion of austerity and how low can we make the budget. It was really to talk about those things, exactly those kinds of things that said, before we go down the path of the austerity, can we have some discussion about what the community needs are, what are the costs that we need to adjust toward that, and to ultimately come up with, a budget that hopefully fits as much of that as possible. And I think through that particular process, like I said in my report, there's, some success, some mixed reaction or mixed result of that. I don't think it went as well as it could have gone from my standpoint, but I was able to at least get the perspective across, in my opinion, of why I started out wanting to have a discussion with you, instead of just giving you a budget and saying, here's what it is and have at it. I wanted to work into a budget discussion along with the capital budget and program, and essentially feel out where we felt comfortable heading or not. And I think that's a key piece of the evolution of the budget process that you had this year, that I tried to initiate with some success.
Okay, and like we have that a little bit. I think our budget process slide mirrors that. If Claudette, can I just like move us on? Because my sense of this conversation is that we may be charged to make some revisions and continue this conversation. So I just want to maybe get through like all the slides. The next two, and I think like Herb, we have the benefit of now having Herb's report, which I think will like help us confirm what it is that we thought we knew. So that's helpful. So the only thing, these two slides kind of indict our comrades over in the school district a little bit. I left this slide out last time, but it's just a reminder that most of the dollar goes to the education fund. So I'll update the slide, but I can't imagine we would present it because that's maybe not kind.
Be careful with a slide because the information in the town report has already changed.
Yeah.
So if you're taking stuff from the town report, I would suggest not, for school related stuff, I would suggest talking to Neil Odell to get what the latest information is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's changed. It's changed in a big way, and they'll be addressing that.
Yeah.
So I minimized the slide, but it's good to like update it. Maybe it like serves for our own information. So Article 9 is the same as last year. Article 11. So this, it would be good to get some feedback on this. I lifted this mostly from Linda Gray's explanation that she posted to the listserv. I thought it was actually very instructive. It's a lot of text. Maybe could benefit from some copy editing, but I think this really gets at I think this is descriptive. And so do people disagree or agree?
I like it. I think it explains it. I think it's difficult to really, you need a little background, I think, to really understand the article. So I think this is helpful.
Okay, so no changes to the article slides. I'll get updated information from Herb for these. I didn't really hear any, Claudette, did you hear any further? Because we'll probably do this together. Did you hear any feedback from our colleagues about additional points about the budget to make? No, they're saying no.
Not really, no. Just
okay.
Probably tweaking some of the other.
Yeah.
So, okay, so we will bring back the final, our proposed final draft in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Thank you for working on that.
I'll send out a PDF directly to everyone, and so you could.
The keynotes, please.
The keynote. So, Claude, what would the process be? Because we can't. How do we do that? No.
Probably shouldn't send it out.
So if I send it out, I can only, so once I send it out for people's review, if they want changes, I cannot share it with anyone else. I have to make the changes and then put it back in the packet. Is that right?
Yeah.
So I can't go, I say like, thank you everyone for your feedback. I'm going to chat again with Claudette. I can't do that.
No.
Okay. So the
I mean, does it count as a decision? I don't know. It's a presentation.
Well, it is technically an agenda.
It's not really that. I mean, I'm not looking to do gymnastics. I'm just looking to say like this ain't a decision, but whatever. If you want to be on
So
the side,
if you have feedback, send it to Roger. Roger will do with it, and I won't know.
Yeah. So for the record, Claudette and I are going to go work on this again based on tonight, and then I'm going to send out a PDF to all of my comrades. You are going to write back to me, and I'm not going to speak to anyone. I'm going to just put it in the packet.
Can you make a meme slide of the Maxwell Smart Cones of Silence where we show how we collaborate outside of a meeting where no one can actually hear each other talk, and so that's how we stay on the right side of the law?
Right. I think it should include the tunnels though between the houses or something.
Of course, that doesn't preclude our secret.
It's interesting. One of the TV stations I can pick up over the air is something that's called Through the Decades. It's like 28.2 or something like that. Maxwell Smart or Get Smart is on every night. Well, early morning actually, but.
Can you believe we're discussing budgeting?
You don't have to hide voice. Anyway, So,
What'd you say? What?
okay, so we're gonna move on. The next item on the agenda is an executive session. There won't be any action coming out of the executive session, just for those who might be listening and still on the call here. So looking for a motion.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Mary.
I move to enter executive session under VSA section 313A3 to discuss the town manager performance improvement plan and to invite the town manager to join said executive session.
Is there a second?
Second.
I think it was seconded by John.
John.
So we'll roll call. Roger,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. And I want us to probably just meet briefly first, and then we'll invite the town manager.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
So I should do the waiting room. Okay.
Yeah, you should. Is there a motion to enter public session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roger, how do you vote?
Yes.
John, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Well, go ahead.
So Herb, you're probably taking notes, huh?
Yeah, so that was John. I will take it, or are you giving that to Mary?
No, that's John's.
John's was the second. Roger?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So adjourned at 10:08.
Thanks, Claudette.
Thank
The
you.
good keeping us on schedule. You've got a good record going of that.
Yes.
Okay.
So early. What am I going to do?
Bye, everybody.
See you guys.
All right.
All right, keep warm.